Fun must be always stay in San Jose. It sounds like the Sharks are on the verge of making a deal with Tomas Hertl. Let's talk about it right now. This is Teal Town Live. Good afternoon. It is 2:30 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, March 16th, 2022. The San Jose Sharks have been reported by multiple sources on the verge of re-signing Tomas Hertl, and we welcome you to Teal Town Live. This is where we react to breaking news here. Of course, smash that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. And of course, follow us on the social, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, if you want to listen to us, along with SoundCloud, Reddit, and Discord, and find everything at tealtownusa.com. And with that, good afternoon to you. I am Erik Kuhre alongside Ian Reid and Erik Landi. Ian, how's it going today?
It's going. I'm here.
You're here. Erik Landi, you're smiling. Are you... thrilled about this one?
We'll get into it, but I think today is I think it's a reaffirming stance that the organization took, and it's a continued commitment, to try to compete. So it's always good to see your team reinvest in itself.
So those who are on the verge of knowing everything, it's been reported by multiple sources, including Pierre LeBrun of TSN and The Athletic, Chris Johnston of TSN and the Steve Dangle podcast, along with David Pagnotta from the Fourth Period, that they are on the verge of re-signing Tomas Hertl. It is reported 8 years, $8 million AAV. Ian, a little pricey, a little too much. What says you?
No, I honestly, as far as cost goes, I'm fine with it. I think we've talked about this a bunch, obviously leading up to the trade deadline about Tomas Hertl and what, he's probably looking for in a contract. And I've been pretty consistent in my talks. That's eight's where the conversation starts. He's not taking less than Couture, and nor should he.
Landy?
I mean, I have to wholeheartedly agree here with Ian. I mean, besides Logan Couture, the most important forward to your core, and he is now the part of the trend setting insofar as the deals are concerned. He's in the leadership organization, upper echelon, whatever you want to call it, but he's one of the pack leaders, and like Ian had said, I think it started at the Logan number, and I think that's kind of what they honed in on pretty early.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of similar to what we've seen with Sharks contracts lately, with the exception of Erik Karlsson having a little bit more money to it, but there was a time in the past where 5-year deals were the max, but things had changed with Burns signing, and then it went to Kane, Couture, and Karlsson.
But this isn't I don't mean to cut you off,
no,
but this isn't this isn't a San Jose phenomenon, right? A lot of guys are getting max year deals. It's easy to sit here and just look at it from a Sharks window and say, oh, well, yeah, Doug Wilson doesn't know what he's doing. But this is happening across the league. This is the way business is done in the NHL now. If you want to lock a guy up, he's going to want the term to go with it. And so, I mean, yeah, do I love the 8-year term? I mean, considering how some of these other contracts have aged, I can see how people might be a little bit sour about that. But this isn't a strictly Doug Wilson phenomenon.
No, and I think, Ian, we could even be talking about a forward who could have been making more money on the open market. I mean, Tomas Hertl, dare I say it, could have been making 9.5, maybe $10 million on a particular team. So, as far as value is concerned, I think was it David Pagnotta had the breakdown of his contract versus market value, and it was $10.5 million was his, quote unquote market value. So he's coming in $2.5 million underneath that. And I would say that that's a pretty conservative number too. I mean, I don't know. I just think that it's a good cap hit. It's a good number, to have that kind of a player be fit in there. Will it have some cap ramifications and implications? Yeah, sure. But you know what? If anything, this year has taught us that cap numbers can be manipulated. There are ways to get out of everything, and so yeah, it's going to be some immediate crunch, I think, financially in the next 1 to 2 years. But you're also going to get some cap relief here too. And who's also to say that Timo Meier, like Ian had brought out the other day on After Dark, he doesn't need to take $10 million at, 1 year.
1 year.
Like that's what the Sharks have to are obligated to give him, but they can give him a 5-year deal at, $35 million and he can take that, so I don't want people to be super hyper focused on, oh, my God, there's going to be this $10 million check that we're going to have to stroke at the end of this year. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
Also, the other thing too is, like, obviously we don't know what's going to be the ultimate end result of the Evander Kane money situation, right? If there's going to be a little bit of money or not a little bit of money, but with Evander Kane's money off the cap, like, really the Sharks are only spending $2.2 million than they were already spending on Hertl. Like, that's not a big deal.
No, not at all.
And that's the big question here is if the Sharks know what the result will be of that Evander Kane contract termination. Will there be a penalty? That's a big one that I think a lot of people are wondering, because a lot of people have tied it in to this Hertl extension as to whether or not we can afford him. You have a number of players that you also need to re-sign right now going into the offseason coming up. Yeah, you have Hertl, that might be off the books, but you also have you have Cogliano, who's been a trade target. I see you, Chester Chivo, announced the Barabanov extension. There's that as well. I mean, not the least of which, Mario Ferraro is a big one. If Jake Middleton around as well, Milosh and Magna, among others. You also have to figure out Jonathan Dahlin. Where do you guys think this fits in? I mean, this is, like you said, there's not a whole lot difference between an Evander Kane deal that was about midway through its tenure versus what Hertl is on the verge of signing.
But you got to remember, though, it's like Hertl already counted towards the cap at almost at what, $5.625 million, right?
Correct.
So it's not like this is like, oh my God, this $8 million is just that ate all that money. It eats a tiny little bit of it.
I think it's net. Yeah, I think the net impact is, like you had said, $2.2 million once the Kane money comes off. And look, I'm still of the opinion with the whole Kane saga that he wasn't terminated because of traveling on the COVID. It was terminated because he was late coming back. So I think that the whole contract negotiation termination thing, I think the Sharks are terminating him on different grounds than what a lot of people think that they're trying to terminate him on. So I think that they're on more solid footing than we like to think in the Twitter sphere. But that being said, look, most of the important guys that you have are either locked up. There are not going to be, a superstar impending free agent or whatever. Everybody else's RFAs or low money deals. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. The thing that I worry about is how this move would impact future depth or future depth signing, right? I mean, yeah, it's $2.2 million. What kind of depth forward can that get you? But I've also circled this team as at least being 1 to 2 impact legitimate players away from getting back into contention status. So you got to fit 2 more impact players underneath the cap like that if you're really serious about going back and being competitive again. I don't know about your take, Ian, but that's where I still think we're 2 impact forwards short.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, right? And I think that's probably where this conversation is going next. Is what's next, right? Like what is the plan going forward? This to me says that this if you're re-signing Hertl at this money this term, you're not rebuilding,
Mm-mm.
right? Like so the obviously the plan here is to get back into contention as quickly as possible. What's going to be interesting is what comes next.
Yeah.
And we said that before too, like even before the with like Hertl would give us an idea of what this team's plan was going forward. And obviously the next move is going to be really the big one. Are we going to move some money off the blue line? How are we going to do that? Because at some point, and this team, like I think as good as James Reimer's been for this team, is James Reimer your long-term answer for contention?
Or Aiden Hill for that matter.
Or Aiden Hill for that matter. I mean, James Reimer, I think, would be the more guy who I would consider because I think he's been the better of the two goalies going forward. But but James Reimer's got there's a lot of mileage on a James Reimer at this point in his career, right? And we've seen him go down with little bumps and bruises through the season. And same with Aiden Hill, who has, I think, had some really good stretches, but he's had some really bad stretches of hockey too. So I mean, obviously there's a lot of big question marks going forward on, okay, so the plan is obviously to compete. How do we get back there? And how do you do that without, I mean, you look at a lot of the teams that are on the come up now, like LA saw the writing on the wall. They rebuilt.
Yep.
The Ducks, same thing, right? It's like, that's going to be the tricky part is now that we've, we're not going to this is not going to be rebuilt, right? Like obviously they're going to more reset or whatever, right? Like obviously they're going to get a decent draft pick again this year, but obviously next year the goal is to be back in the playoffs. I don't know how you do that with this roster as currently constructed.
No, there has to be major changes, and I think they expect the likes of William Eklund. You can talk about the number of guys in college and in juniors right now. Whether it's Bordelot or Robbins or Weisblatt or Gushkin or Coe that are going to make this team up next year. They're definitely, I think, making up the team for the Barracuda next year for their shiny new arena. But yeah, you have your core in there. The question, and I see it in the chat too, is first off from Crispy Churro, which by the way, good to see you, long time listener,
an OG,
a very OG.
Yeah, OG.
Eklund and Bordelot coming next year. I mean, you kind of have to expect those guys to come in, and are they going to be ready to roll? I mean, we've seen it, a number of times.
I think
Eklund's going to get every chance to stick next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because he almost stuck this year.
Yeah.
I mean, he was damn close to staying, and I think that one more year in the SHL is gonna help him that much more, and then he'll come back and it'll be like an Elias Pettersson situation, right? He won't play. He didn't play that much in Utica, so it's not like he's going to play that much for the Barracuda, in my opinion. I think again, I'm just looking through right now at Cap Friendly guys, and I think what I like to see on here is where is Ryan Merkley going to fit on this team? Like he seems like he's ready now, and he needs to push out a defenseman, and you got the three big boys at the top, sitting at the top, and then you've got basically three question marks at the bottom. Where do you guys see Ryan Merkley being on this team, and him trying to be an impact player as well?
Well, that's where I say, right? Like obviously I think when he's been up, and Bob Boughner hasn't put the tightest possible leash on him, I think he's acclimated himself pretty good to the pro game. But the question is now is, are we going to do anything else to the blue line other than just bringing Ryan Merkley up? Because I feel like as silly as this is going to sound, but this is, I'm assuming Bob Boughner's still coaching this team next year at this point. I haven't gotten I haven't been given anything from the Sharks to think that's not going to be the case.
Right.
So is Ryan Merkley going to make a team that, does this team still have a Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson? And are they going to get a Ryan Merkley at the same time? Based on Bob Boughner's coaching that we've seen this year, I don't foresee that being a thing. So, and again, and I think that's the one thing where I kind of get worried about this team too, is like, what if they try to reinforce, like if they see all these guys as the core? I don't know how you'd still see Vlasic as core at this point, but humor me for a minute. Like if they still see that, like my concern with a move like this is like, are they going to move a guy like Ryan Merkley to try and grab a guy that'll fit into whatever Bob Boughner is trying to do?
Yeah, that I think is totally valid, Ian, because I think, with the signing of Hertl, it's definitely a win now signing. And with the pieces that we've amassed, we're kind of at the very, if you want to even call it the very beginnings of a rebuild, the very beginnings of trying to recapture pieces and to, reinvest in the farm system and stuff. So it's a very delicate time, I think, and I look at a player like Jake Middleton as probably being a deadline victim. I also keep circling back to like, okay, what are we going to get out of Nikolai Konechov when we get him back? We've also got, Radim Šimić still on the sidelines, and then Mario. So, to me, there's a glut of defensemen. Jacob Megna, Nikolai Milosh, and Middleton, those guys have all shown that they can handle NHL minutes. Now, that's kind of the double-edged sword of having the injuries. One, you get to showcase what else you have in the system and get to see what else you have in the system. But two, creates the problem with the log jam. So there's got to be at least some kind of move to make some space on the blue line. But what that move is going to be is going to be very interesting, and I think it's going to dictate what we see next from the team.
Yeah, look at this team's going to have to do something on the contract side. If Timo Meier is long for this world, something has to happen. One of these big money deals that is not living up to it is going to have to move by some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, they're currently
looking at Vlasic, but
yeah, they're currently at $24 million with cap space going into next year. I would have to think that there's got to be a corresponding move, guys. Or, is there even the thought of Hertl's done? I'm going to sign this deal. Now you can trade me to whoever can get it, so that way he has his 8-year deal.
Sign and trades are not a thing in the NHL. Like, I know everyone's going to be like, but Setaguchi! But, like, yeah, and that was how long ago? Like, sign and trades are just not a thing in the NHL. It would be a more entertaining league if they were, but they're not. They're really not. Plus Setaguchi's the one thing where people come up with and Setaguchi, sign and trades are definitely a thing because Setaguchi. What year was that?
That was 2011.
Yeah.
And the next day he was traded for Brent Burns.
The other thing we got to realize too is what other team has $8 million outright cap space, unless the Sharks are taking on another contract back. But I don't see that happening. So
it seems like a really weird, there's
too big of a contract to sign and move like that.
To sign and move like that, I agree.
Yeah. So I think that's off the table. I think he's going to be here for the long run, and now we got to see what the Sharks are going to put around him.
Yeah, and look at I picked on Vlasic a lot this show, but I think the chat has hit it right on the head. If you're looking at a guy to move a big money contract out, it's probably Brent Burns, because and again, this is something I've said on many a show as well. I think teams would, if a guy like Brent Burns became available. I know some Sharks fans are really sour on Burns a little bit, but NHL GMs would trip over themselves to acquire a Brent Burns.
Oh my God! Even like the Rangers,
even
like the Rangers would want to.
I don't even think you would have to eat a ton of cap to do it either. Like, I think there are teams out there that would trip over themselves to take Brent Burns even at full value.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement there. You look at, every team is on the lookout for an offensive puck moving defenseman, somebody who has Stanley Cup experience, somebody who has won Norris trophies and can guide kids, can lead a locker room, whatever, add a character face.
Not even that, but every team, like, and the one thing with Brent Burns, like, oh, but whatever. Every GM is going to think, oh, I've got a guy that'll cover for Brent Burns' defensive deficiencies. I've got the guy.
Do you think Middleton's good is gone as we get closer to the deadline? I mean, the asking price is pretty nice, but
I mean, here's the thing. Like, I've really liked what Jake Middleton's done this year, but I don't like. It's not like Jake Middleton's going to walk into some monster contract next year.
Sell high.
Yeah,
Sell
I mean,
high.
if you can move like Jake, if you can get like we said the other night on the show, right? Like, it was probably last night, wasn't it? I have no concept of time anymore.
I don't, neither do I. I mean, I think
the rumor is
we're on 3 hours of sleeping.
Like the fourth or fifth best prospect in an organization plus a second is the asking price for Middleton.
Yeah, and if you can get that, I mean, all the power to you. You take that every
so
day.
So high.
I mean, and you're setting up for if you weren't with us yesterday during both of our shows, Pierre LeBrun reported that the Sharks' asking price for Jake Middleton is a second rounder plus another pick or a prospect.
Yeah, you take it every time. Like you take that every time for Jake Middleton. Like that would be I think I said, like, again last night, I said it would be like some Barclay Goodrowian larceny.
So if you're just joining us, we are hearing.
Hey, there's a good question out in the chat, Eric. That maybe we should go over once you're done with the update.
Yeah, let me just reset here, Landy. As we approach the 3:00 hour, Tomas Hertl is reportedly on the verge of re-signing with the San Jose Sharks. From multiple sources, it is 8 years, $8 million AAV. We don't know if there is any trade clause. I would have to think there's some sort of move there, but I'm wondering if they will have some flexibility. We'll find out hopefully in the very near future. Curtis Pachelka has said that the Sharks will have something to say sometime this afternoon on that. But Landy, go ahead and bring up who.
I think Crispy Churro brought up, what did you think the Sharks said to convince Hertl to stay? I thought that was kind of an interesting question. What do you think the sell job was from the organization to Hertl?
I mean, there's a lot worse places you could play hockey than Northern California, right? I mean,
but I mean, they must have given him some kind of like insight as to roster construction or what they hope the roster is going to pan out.
I think they told him, like, obviously they're committed to whether they, I don't know if they went into details, but obviously I think they're Doug Wilson or, Joe Will through by proxy of Doug Wilson said, look, we're looking to compete. We're doing things to try and compete. And maybe, I mean, if you looked at this team this year and you're like, oh, well, this team would be a playoff team if not for COVID injuries, blah, 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 blah. I mean, all the power to you, but I mean, that's just delusional thinking.
Yeah, I mean, with Erik Karlsson, maybe not, but
no. Well, maybe, but I mean, the closest they were to the playoffs before Erik Karlsson went down, because a bunch of teams had 10 games and they had like 10 games in hand on the Sharks, right?
Well, you're right, like,
I think if we went through the season, all things being equal, the Sharks would probably be sitting in the standings where they are now the whole time.
Sleepy Mofo saying, in response to Crispy Churro's question, Eklund on your line, Tomas.
Yeah, right.
I think players play. I mean, look at it. Like, obviously, it's a nice place to live. I mean, he has a young family, so staying, like, it's easier to keep doing the same thing than go to a totally new market and try different, you know what I mean? Like, young family, like, he obviously he wants that stability, and who doesn't, right? And 8 years gives him that stability.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you also have to consider too, he's still an athlete, right? I mean, still a guy that wants to win, and I think he had even said so much as being in a competitive place is also important to him. So I is curious. It'd be love to be a fly on the wall and hear if they had given him any kind of insight as to the direction that they're going. If it really is, next year they're penciling in Eki as like either the second line winger or a third line center, how that depth is going to play out. If you do move one of the big defensemen, dear God, now you're putting, the fate of the whole offensive blue line structure in Erik Karlsson's fragile hands, right?
Well, I mean,
that's scary.
But that also brings opportunity, right? Like if you move Brent Burns out, then that leaves a hole for Ryan Merkley to kind of get a chance to figure it out at the NHL level on a consistent basis.
I'm just saying that we can't pencil in Erik Karlsson for 82 games anymore. I think that part of his career is done, and I think we're going to be lucky to see him, 65, 70 games a year. So I'll agree. I'd still take it as well. But all I'm just saying is that you kind of have to factor that in now when you're talking about who's going to be your blue line alpha, right? And so you're going to have to be okay with not having Karlsson for potentially 15 to 20 games.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think you want to think for the best. I mean, look at the Erik Karlsson deal's done, right? The ink is so beyond dry at this point. Like this is the bed the Sharks have made for themselves. And if you watch this season, like they are a considerably better team with Erik Karlsson on the ice than not. So I mean, maybe optimistically you say, okay, yeah, we're gonna you might miss him for 15 games or 20 games, right? But even still, like you're still gonna be, while you have him in the lineup, like you're gonna be a considerably better team.
Yep. Matt Dynan and I think also Dana Meyerson also had a similar question right now. What does this mean about Timo? We don't have enough to re-sign him. What other options do we have out there in regards to getting Timo done, or are there other options in the pipeline for Timo Meier?
I mean,
we did cover this a little bit earlier, but
yeah.
I mean, Ian can go over it real quick. Basically, that $10 million that we're all worrying about, the qualifying offer, that is what the Sharks are obligated to give him if they don't give him a contract other than that. But they're going to give him something else, and he's not going to cost $10 million a year.
If Timo Meier, here's the thing with Timo Meier, right? Like again, I think he's another guy. Like he obviously doesn't have a young family or anything, but you can take $10 million next year, or you can have maybe 8.5 over X number of years, right? Like what is worth more to you at that point? 1 year at $10 million and then maybe poison the well, and then maybe you have a bad season and then you get paid like 6, right? Like, or you can make 8 for 6 or 8 or whatever. Assume 8 just because it's Doug Wilson, but like, again,
all he has to do is ask his best friend Kevin LeBanc how he got his contract done,
Right. I think so the situation with Timo Meier is like, obviously look at other moves are going to happen here. Yes, right now if everything stays the same, like that next Timo Meier contract is going to be tricky, but I can't imagine things are going to stay the same. Like something has to give here. They can't, like, I don't think, and maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think the Sharks are just going to continue handing out contracts with and then hoping that they can just shove in a bunch of other guys making $700K to fill out a lineup. Like if that happens, then obviously the Sharks have bigger problems. I think there's going to be other moves before Timo Meier really comes into play, and I'm not concerned about it. Like I'm really not worried about Timo. They'll figure it out.
And as we figure this out, and we're waiting, I keep checking my phone, and we're just waiting for,
the official announcement to come down.
Waiting. I was like, all right, come on, email, come on, let me get the release out, or hear from anybody, because there's like none of the insiders are saying anything at the moment right now on whether or not this is done. And the second it comes down, you guys let me know if you see anything. But yeah, I mean, that's the concern, is how is this team going to be built, not just years down the road, but I think next year. Looking at Bonino, who's going to have another year on his deal. You have Cogliano, who is a UFA, who could be, a guy that can help teams out or solidify the locker room. I think his, I think it was more so on, in the locker room as opposed to on the ice. And yes, he can help you PK and everything. All right, we'll hold that off for a second. We now have official word from David Pagnotta, the fourth period. It is a done deal. The Sharks and Tomas Hertl have finalized their 8-year extension, as we reported earlier. $8 million AAV neighborhood. I expect a formal announcement from the Sharks later today. So it is now officially done. Hertl is staying.
Be right back. I gotta kill my dog.
Oh, that's not scary at all. But Landy, now it's done. The trade pieces, us salivating over whether or not Hertl, is gonna get moved.
Salivating. I was biting my nails.
You were looking at, like, okay, we could get a first rounder and others for him. I mean, your thoughts now it's done.
Yeah. Look, you never get in trouble for paying your best players, right? I mean, yeah, you can drastically overpay your best players, and I think that we can have debates about people on this team who are being paid whatever. But that being said, you just look at the production value that you get from the forward, where he's slotted, the amount of minutes he plays. It's a good contract. He's 28 years old. He's going to be 36 by the time it's done. It's a little old, but there's a guy over in Dallas who's bucking that trend too. So this is a new generation of players that have taken care of themselves a lot better than previous generations. So 36 is not what it once was, ladies and gentlemen. But that being said, again, I don't think you get in trouble for paying your best players. Now, what's going to be interesting is how is the rest of the team going to get backfilled? What's going to happen with a player like Alexander Barabanov? What's going to happen with some of the younger players that need spots on this team who've got players who are not performing up to contract or not performing up to, what the organization expects of them. So it's going to be interesting to see how the organization ranks the talent that it's got currently, what it sees in its future depth-wise, and what other pieces it can add to get it back into contention.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is what's going to be shaped around him, and like we said, we've talked about the number of guys that are going to be coming in the influx. I think there's been talk about defensively, and we've talked about Burns and maybe Vlasic. The organization believes they have the defensive pieces ready to go. I mean, Reimer and Hill are, I don't want to say the future, but
they're stopgaps.
Yeah, they're stopgaps. While you hope for anything to come up now, I think now that this is done, you can kind of take a look back and now maybe do the deep dive, Ian, as to see what can you do, what's here, could we move something now before Monday at noon?
Yeah, I mean, never say never. I mean, look at the Sharks. This is still a team that's not going to make the playoffs. Like, re-signing Hertl doesn't change this team's fate this season, right? So I think that, yeah, I mean, if you can get a deal done for, like, I still think that this team should sell. If this team has opportunities to sell, it should sell at this point. So, if somebody calls on a guy that you don't think is going to be in the long-term plans, then yeah, if you can get picks for some of these guys, great. But it's I think now that you've re-signed Hertl, it does make it a little trickier of what you move at this point, right? Like, again, you have James Reimer under contract on a pretty decent contract for next year. I'm not rushing out to move James Reimer at this point. For what? For a tiny gain, and then you hope Aiden Hill can be the good Aiden Hill?
Be a healthy Aiden Hill more than anything.
And a healthy Aiden Hill, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's like you can't just sell everything, obviously, going forward. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, because you're not going to, the chat saying, and obviously we've heard this as well, like the Sharks are going to probably move to Barabanov next. So you're not going to move, you're not going to move a guy like Barabanov. You're not going to move a guy like James Reimer. In my opinion, you don't anyway. I think the Sharks would be incredibly foolish to trade James Reimer for anything at this point, given that we've just re-signed Hertl for 8 years. Unless if they sold Hertl on the fact that next year is still going to be, a step back to move a step forward, then maybe you do. But to me, based on what we're seeing, this team thinks they're going to be competitive next year. So I want to see what moves they're going to make in order to move back into contention. And look, I mean, the Pacific Division is kind of a gong show, right? Like it's kind of a mess. Like the teams that we thought were going to run away with the division are scrapping for playoff spots right now in Edmonton and Vegas. Calgary's resurging. The Kings are on their way up, but they're still, they're not there, but they're definitely they're on the upswing now. The Ducks, I think.
So is Anaheim.
Yeah, I think Anaheim's on the upswing, not on the same trajectory as the Kings, perhaps. Vancouver's Vancouver. Who knows what the hell they're going to do? That team's just
my God,
weird,
yeah.
Right? So it's like, is it, is there moves that the Sharks could make? Now again, am I saying they're going to be Stanley Cup contenders? No, but in this division, you could make a few moves and get yourself at least back into the playoffs. And now, are they going to win the Stanley Cup when they get there? Probably not. But I can see a path back to the playoffs. It's not like super well lit and really wide, but I can see it.
And maybe that's the case sorry, Landy. I mean, that's the case that that they think they are one or two pieces away because the Pacific Division is as wacky as it is to just jump right back in it. But yeah, you've seen how LA has gotten a boost. We've seen what Anaheim is capable of. I mean, we've seen Vancouver as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Go ahead, Landy. I cut you off there.
Oh, no. I was just going to kind of go into looking at some of the pieces that, I would target to trade here from the Sharks roster, and Cogliano, I think we all kind of touched on. Middleton, I think, is a guy that we're kind of all looking at if you can sell high on him. I'm looking
Shimmick on retained salary.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad move. You also have Dzingel, right? He's still in the minors, so you could potentially move him, although he cleared waivers. So
yeah, but never underestimate a GM's ability to pay for something that he could have had for free.
Oh, that is true. That is true.
I'm just surprised as to how quickly his value is gone. I mean, 3 years ago he was traded to Columbus for a second rounder, among other things, and now he's gone through the waiver process 2-3 times this year.
Yeah. I mean,
but look at his point production, though. I mean, that's the thing is he fell off a cliff after the 20 season. So, I mean, I agree. It's kind of a very big fall from grace, but it's also, considering what he's output, it is commiserate, to how he has been playing.
I think the thing is, when he did so well in Ottawa, right? But when he was in Ottawa, I mean, he was by designation basically one of the guys they leaned on the most.
Right.
So I just wonder, sometimes guys just excel in that environment, and then when they have to come in and they're, obviously there's better players, right? And they're more of a complementary piece. They just don't seem to, with the pressure not on as much as it would be in a situation like Ottawa, or maybe there's no pressure because you're in a situation like Ottawa, and then you sign a big contract and you're on a team where, you're expected to contribute, but you're not the guy, and there's maybe, I think it's harder to play under that kind of pressure.
The only thing that in getting back into to Hertl and kind of where the organization and stuff is, I mean, I think our worst nightmares is that this becomes, Minnesota from 4 or 5 years ago, right, where they just languish in the mushy middle. And yeah, from what we saw this season, I mean, there is a lot of concern there that this is kind of where this is going.
You know what contract I immediately thought of when this was talked about? And they're not the same player, and it's not like, I don't want to...
Zach Parise.
No. Justin Applicator.
Oh.
No. I am not trying to compare Tomas Hertl to Justin Abdicator. What I was looking at it more from where the teams were when those contracts were signed. Right. And and obviously, like, Ken Holland thought he had a plan too, and that didn't work out because they never made the playoffs since. And I wonder if, and again, I'm not trying to compare players, because I know some people are like, oh my God, this guy's such an asshole. He's trying to compare Tomas Hertl to Justin Abdicator. What the hell's the matter? I'm not comparing the players. I'm just comparing the significance of the contract signings when they were signed. And I wonder if this is going to be
fan favorites.
Justin Applicator.
And Logan Teal saying, Applicator was carried by Datsuk.
Right, and I'm not comparing the players. Like, I'm just comparing like the way the contract when it was signed, and then the immediate, like, the way the team continued to trend down after.
Dude, Applicator just carried Datsuk's Gatorade bottle, right? That's all he carried.
Grand Desir kind of putting it plain and simple. Do we like this deal or no? Or is it too early to tell because we just don't know what else is in there?
In a vacuum for the player, I like the deal. In the vacuum of the Sharks organization, it's a wait and see to see what else they're going to put around the player. And I think that's kind of why this isn't like super exciting for us. It's kind of another step into the murkiness. You know what I mean? This is just another, if on the one hand, it's one more step away from the rebuild camp. And on the other hand, it's a signal that the team wants to continue to be competitive. Now, that plan to be competitive in the last 3 years hasn't really panned out. Just look at the records of the last 3 seasons. So in a vacuum, if I'm just looking at the player and I'm looking at for what he brings value-wise, I'm happy. If I'm looking at it as a fan and him being my favorite player of the team, I'm happy. If I'm looking at longevity for the organization and where this puts the organization, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty similar here. If you look at the player and you look at the money and you look at the term, it's fair. Like, it's a fair deal, especially when you compare, like, contrast with other contracts on this team.
Dare I say value?
Yeah, I think
it's a little bit of value.
I think there's a little bit of value there. I think it's a fair deal. I think that Tomas Hertl could have easily gotten this or even more on the open market. Mm-hmm. I like the player. And again, and I've said this 100 times too, right? Like, as a fan, like, Tomas Hertl's not a guy I want to see get marched out of town.
Right.
But unfortunately, it's a business, right? Obviously, we don't have to worry about that now. He's staying. But Landy put it right, like, hit it right on the head. The question is now is what are the follow-up moves? What are the moves that are going to be made to make sure that this team returns to contention? Or are we going to look back at this deal in 4 years and is this going to be the point where we look back and say, yeah, man, Doug Wilson really screwed us, and now it's going to take 5 more years to get out of this mess.
And see, that's kind of where I'm concerned about it. I was like, I like this deal. I like the value of the numbers for him. He's had a really solid year. Granted, he hit a schneid that, that's the last place you want to hit a schneid, is coming in the middle of, before and after the All-Star break, where he had like one goal in I think like 15 games, and now
I wouldn't rule out hand injury, by the way. I think he might be dealing with something on his wrist, because I remember him taking a wrist and he had not looked the same since. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's dealing with something.
And we all know about his knee injuries that he's had, most recently 2 seasons ago, where he sat up. I know.
I think the knees are okay. I think the knees are okay.
Like, I know, but if you look at the number of games that Tomas Hertl has played, like, I'm not worried about his knees, man. Like, he's played so many games. Like, he hasn't missed a. There's been, like, obviously there was the thing with Dustin Brown where he missed a bunch of games and he missed a few games. Like, but if you go through the seasons and go back and based on how many games were played in each season, like, he's played a lot of games, man.
I don't think that this is Mihan Mahalik 2.0. If that's what you're saying.
No. I just know he had the injury from Dustin Brown. Fuck you, Dustin Brown. The one that happened during the Cup final, and then 2 seasons ago.
Fuck you, Patrick Hornquist.
And then of course the one against Vancouver in 2020. We got to hear Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle for a goal song one time, and then he was done for the year. And like a tiger saying, hopefully he is built like another I can talk today. Hopefully built like another Czech Yager.
Yeah, like I'm not worried
Joe
about, like,
Nieuwendyk was able to skate without his ACL.
Yeah,
right.
I don't know. I think that the injury concerns on Hertl are a little overblown.
Okay.
I just that's what I believe.
Oh.
And Joe Nieuwendyk was a hell of a player, I might add you.
Won a cup after Brian Marchman took his knee out. So we're currently at 54 people watching, 17 likes. Come on, 17 likes. Come on, let's get it to 48 for Tomas Hertl here as he resigns for wishful thinking. I know, as he resigns with the San Jose Sharks at 8 years, $8 million AAV. That's being reported by David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period.
Hashtag confirmed.
Hashtag confirmed.
What I think before we end though, like, obviously there's no clauses been announced yet, but I'm not like this is another thing I'm not really worried about. Like, you're like, oh no, what if it's a no movement clause? I'm not worried about it, man. Like, no movement, people on no moves and no trades get traded all the fucking time.
Yep.
Like, it's I think it's over. Like, yeah, there's some situations where maybe it has come back to bite some teams. I remember a certain era in Toronto where that was a big deal, where guys just wouldn't waive. But I think if it comes down to it, like, guys are going to want to go to a situation where if it becomes very clear that there's no winning happening anytime soon, I think guys that want to win are going to move on.
Hell, even Edmonton's a destination now with Connor McJesus.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people are gonna get worried. Like, if I think some people are gonna blow their tops if it turns out to be like 8x8, no movement clause. But man, no movement clauses get moved all the time.
And there you go. I mean, whether it's modified no trade, or if it's a no trade and no move, fact of the matter is, this is a piece that the Sharks have solidified their future. Can, not to say they haven't built around Tomas Hertl, but now definitely he's one of those pieces that they work around for the likes of, like, as we said earlier, Bordelot, Robbins, Weisblatt, Co., etc. And the Sharks believe that, again, they are not rebuilding. They are competing for playoffs at the very least. I won't go cup contender because I don't think they've shown that. They've shown, moments here and there, but so Matt Dinan one more time before we get out of here. I think, guys, does Hertl or Ferraro become the eventual captain? Considering this club's history of stripping C's, I don't know about a captaincy change?
I don't know. I think Couture. I don't like. There's a lot of talk about Couture's leadership and everything, and I'm not in the room, right? So I don't. I don't know, but I think some of these things, like I think it really wouldn't have mattered who was the captain going forward. Like and I said this in Discord, and I've probably said this on the show a few times too. Like I don't think like the god of all leaders, Joe Pavelski, is making this a playoff team as currently constructed. So I don't know what to tell you. Like I think I think Couture took over the captaincy at a time when obviously the Sharks were the warts, like all the cracks were showing before we got to this point.
Right.
All the cracks were there. If you wanted to see them, we knew that the party was going to end. The check was coming due. I don't think
they
thought
kicked
it was
the
going to come
can so
due.
many times.
We did. I didn't think the check was going to be due as quickly as it came due, but this was coming.
Oh yeah.
And,
like there was going to be a step back at some point. And I think Couture just unfortunately got the C coinciding with the same time as the team took a step back. So, and look it's going to happen. That's hockey, right? The guy who wears the C is the heavy is the head that wears the crown. But I don't put a lot of this on Couture.
I just sense it's a bit of finger pointing that, oh, you're the captain. The team didn't make the playoffs. It's your fault. That's
exactly.
kind of the vibe I get.
Like I said, heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Right.
I get it. But I don't think, like, I don't look at this team and I look at this team and I could name a lot more problems than before I get to Couture as captain. And I don't think you strip the C off Couture and you put it on Hertl next year. If they don't make the right moves, what's changed? Nothing. A letter moved from one jersey to another.
Right. I agree on that. I don't think a letter changes anything. I don't think it should be moved, at least in my mind. So, all right. Well, in case you missed anything or you want to watch this again, check us out on tealtownusa.com or your favorite podcatcher, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio. Of course, hit that subscribe button. It does go a long way to help us out. Of course, thank you to everybody who jumped up on the like train there, got up to 30. Thank you very much. But Landy, I'll start with you. Your final thoughts on as Hertl gets his money.
Like I said, it's a player that we've all watched since he came up as a baby Shark, and has been near and dear to our hearts for a long time. So it's good to see him sign pen to paper to stay with the Sharks for the long term. It opens up a lot of questions for me, but again, I think I'm just happy that I can buy a 48 sweater and not have to worry in 2 or 3 years or heck, even a few months that it's gonna not be valid anymore, or not it's not gonna be where he's playing. So it's good to see him on the team, but again, for me it does open a lot of other questions though as to where this team is going.
All right, he's at Erik Landi. Ian is at Ian Blogs Hockey. Your final thoughts, my friend?
I think it's like I said, man. The interesting days are ahead now, because either we're gonna look ahead of this, like we're gonna look back at this signing in 2 years. Like this is the turning point for this franchise, and especially the turning point for Doug Wilson's reign as GM. This is where he's either gonna put it back together or he's gonna set this franchise back a decade, and I'm fascinated to see which one it is.
All right, my friend, thank you very much. I'm at PuckGuy14 on the Twitter and Instagram. I think there was a lot of pressure from Tomas to get this deal done within the last few weeks. We saw it with his Schneid. It seemed as they were getting closer and closer, his play has gotten better. So I fully expect him to have another rooster trick on Thursday night as the Sharks take on the LA Kings. That's when we will reconvene with you here on the YouTube channel on After Dark and the post-game show. Landy will be doing that one for sure. So we appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. That will tell you when we go on the air when news like this happens. And to reiterate one more time, Tomas Hertl is still a San Jose Shark for the next 8 years. We'll have more on this as it develops. And until next time, keep it real, keep it teal, keep it real teal. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you for watching.